So you look in the mirror and you see one person, right? You see one body, one brain, one immune system. But honestly, that reflection is kind of just an illusion. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to shatter that illusion completely. Because the truth is, you are mostly a walking ecosystem. In fact, microbial cells actually outnumber your human cells. We are talking about trillions of tiny organisms here. Trillions. They're hanging out on your skin, inside your mouth, and especially deep down inside your gut. And they aren't just, passive passengers along for the ride. They are actively influencing your digestion, your metabolism, your immune system, and possibly even your brain. Scientists are increasingly looking at this bustling microscopic world as a completely separate, hidden organ. And get this, it can weigh as much as your brain.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by officially meeting your ecosystem. Then, we'll explore immunity and the gut-brain axis. Third, we'll look at what actually changes your microbiome. Fourth, we'll dive into probiotics, prebiotics, and your diet. And finally, we're going to debunk this whole perfect microbiome myth.
Okay, part 1. Meet your ecosystem. What exactly is the microbiome?
So what is it? It's the vast community of microorganisms, and we're talking bacteria, viruses, and fungi living in and on your body. Now, before you panic at the words virus or bacteria, let me reassure you, most of these microbes are not dangerous at all. In fact, a huge number of them are absolutely essential to your survival. Think of your body not just as a machine, but as this bustling city. Different microbial species are like citizens, and they all have very specific jobs. Some interact with your immune system, some keep hostile bugs from moving in, and others do the heavy lifting of breaking down your food.
And here is exactly how they do that job. Let's say you eat a massive plate of roasted vegetables. Your human digestive enzymes actually cannot break all that fiber down, so it travels deep into your colon entirely intact. That is when your gut bacteria roll up their sleeves and get to work. They ferment that fiber, turning it into these incredibly useful compounds called short-chain fatty acids. And those fatty acids actively nourish the cells lining your gut. So when you eat fiber, you aren't just feeding yourself. You're literally feeding the organisms living inside you. Moving on to section 2, immunity and the gut-brain axis, a communication hub. This microscopic city we just talked about, it actually acts as a really critical communication hub, especially for your immune system, which is constantly asking one major question. Is this dangerous or is this harmless? See, your digestive system is constantly exposed to the outside world. Every time you swallow, you're introducing food, potential pathogens, just countless molecules. So your immune system has to act as this 24/7 security guard, and it relies heavily on a healthy, diverse microbiome to help it make the right call. These microbes essentially train your immune system, helping it keep a balanced, calm response rather than freaking out in a state of chronic alarm or inflammation. But the communication doesn't just stop at immunity. Enter the gut-brain axis. This is the constant communication network between your gut and your brain, via nerves, hormones, and the immune system. Your gut and your brain aren't just isolated worlds. They're talking to each other all day long, primarily through this major highway called the vagus nerve. Ever felt butterflies in your stomach right before a big presentation? Or maybe you completely lost your appetite because you were super stressed? Yeah, that's the gut-brain axis in action. Your brain and gut are constantly talking, and your gut microbiome is actively participating in that conversation. Which brings us to a really popular question. Can your gut bacteria actually change your mood? You've probably seen the internet hype screaming that your gut completely controls your happiness. Well, let's pump the brakes just a bit here. While it's super exciting that some gut bacteria can produce or influence compounds that interact with our nervous system, it's definitely an oversimplification to say they outright control your emotions. Human mood is deeply complex, right? Your genetics, your sleep, daily stress, hormones, your environment, they all play massive roles. So the microbiome is absolutely a fascinating piece of the puzzle, for sure, but it isn't a magical explanation for everything you feel. All right, section 3. What changes your microbiome? Let's look at the external factors. So what exactly changes the landscape of this internal ecosystem of ours? Let's start with antibiotics. Look, these are life-saving medicines, and we absolutely need them. But they don't perfectly distinguish between the helpful bacteria in your gut and the harmful bacteria causing an infection. When you take them, your gut community takes a hit. Sometimes it bounces back super quickly, and sometimes it's altered for much longer. The crucial point here isn't to be terrified of antibiotics. I mean, a serious bacterial infection is way more dangerous than temporary microbiome changes. The goal is just responsible medical use. Take them when a doctor says you genuinely need them, not just casually.
Beyond medicine, you might be wondering what destroys your microbiome on a daily basis. People are always looking for that one single toxic food to blame. But honestly, it's really about what you're missing. A lifestyle that's consistently low in fiber and heavily dominated by ultra-processed foods simply starves your beneficial microbes. They literally do not have the fuel they need to survive, so they die off, leaving a much weaker ecosystem behind. Because at the end of the day, diversity matters. Think of your gut like a forest. A forest with only one type of tree is incredibly vulnerable, right? A single disease or pest could wipe it out. But a highly diverse, varied forest is resilient, adaptable, and strong. The exact same principle applies to your gut. A varied microbial environment is so much stronger. The more diverse your diet, specifically your plant intake, the more diverse your gut community can potentially become.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, probiotics, prebiotics, and diet, how we actually go about feeding the ecosystem. So how do we feed that diversity? Let's decode some of the confusing supplement terminology floating around the internet. First up, probiotics. These are live microorganisms found in certain foods and supplements. But before you go out and buy a super expensive supplement, remember that probiotics are not all the same. Different strains do completely different things. A bottle isn't automatically beneficial just because it has the word probiotic slapped on the label. We have to ask which specific strain is this, what specific purpose does it serve, and what is the actual scientific evidence backing it up.
Then we have prebiotics. These are substances, usually dietary fibers, that serve as the actual fuel for your microorganisms. Sometimes the absolute best strategy to support your gut ecosystem isn't trying to add new foreign bacteria from some pill. It's simply feeding the good guys that are already living inside you.
Let's just put these side by side so it's super clear. Probiotics, those are the microorganisms themselves, the bugs. Prebiotics, that is the fuel for those microorganisms. By eating a really wide variety of plant foods like your vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and seeds, you are providing different types of prebiotic fibers. And since different microbes prefer different fuels, a varied diet basically ensures you're feeding the whole diverse ecosystem. And finally, Section 5, the perfect microbiome myth. Spoiler alert, there is no perfect microbiome. See, the internet desperately wants you to believe there is this one perfect, optimal gut profile that you should be striving for. But in reality, your microbiome is uniquely influenced by your genetics, your diet, your environment, your age, any medications you take, your overall lifestyle, and even your early life experiences. The microbiome community inside one perfectly healthy person can look totally different from another completely healthy person's microbiome. There is no single perfect microbiome to chase. The real goal is a resilient ecosystem that just works well for your specific body.
And here is a really empowering realization. Your microbiome is not fixed. It changes over time in response to your daily habits and your environment. This means the food you eat today isn't just affecting you for the next few hours. Every single meal is an opportunity to gradually influence the environment where your gut microbes live. You have a direct say in shaping this ecosystem over time.
So let's just summarize the actual actionable steps here. It's surprisingly simple, grounded advice. Eat a variety of plants to get different fibers. Limit your intake of ultra-processed foods that starve those microbes. Stay physically active. Get proper sleep. And use antibiotics responsibly. You really don't need expensive monthly stool tests, and you definitely don't need some magic overpriced green powder to reset your digestive system. Just provide a lifestyle and an environment where a healthy, diverse community can naturally thrive. I want to leave you with this final, kind of wild thought. You are not eating alone. Trillions of microorganisms are constantly living right alongside you, breaking down food, interacting with your immune system, and communicating with your body in ways we are honestly just beginning to fully understand. And the most fascinating part? You are feeding them every single day without even realizing it. So the next time you sit down for a meal, look down at your plate and remember, there's an entire microscopic world inside of you waiting to see what's on the menu. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.